not that it is, but anyway, that's the way the academic profession presents it, and so I will, stand by what they present. But I happen to be very fortunately visiting professor of law at Liberty University School of Law, and I recommend everybody come down and visit us down there because this is a great bunch. And I have also the distinction of having worked for the United States Department of Justice as a principal investigator from 1983 to 1985 at American University, investigating images of children, crime, and violence in Playboy, Penthouse, and Hustler.
Wow.
Yes, identifying child pornography in Playboy magazine, deliberate and systemic over time. So we'll talk about that hopefully as we move along, but not a lot. Let's see what else important. So, and I've had the distinction of being able to expose Dr. Alfred Kinsey, who created the current, like a chain, current sex trafficking industry with establishing the fact in 1948, 1953 that children are sexual from birth, they're unharmed by sex activity with adults, and laying down the track for what ended up taking place in our society. So, and through the laws and public policies and all that sort of thing. So that's me in a breath. And may I please introduce Bishop here, who will then take it next step. Bishop
Okay, my name is Harry Jackson. I am not an earned PhD.
Oh,
as
dear.
yourself.
Well, then I think he has to leave.
Okay. So she's got enough degrees for both of us, I hope. And I'm very thankful for the rest of the panel. My interest in this whole thing really revolves around engaging and talking about the culture. Most recently, though, I have spent some time with teenagers and young people within the context of our own church and network of churches that we currently lead. And I am a little bit shocked at the way things are going. I've recently begun a daily talk radio program. It's on it's Urban Family Talk Network. It's a part of American Family Radio. And it's a very interesting process getting involved with trying to talk as you guys have been working. You can run, you can't hide, folks. Bradley Dean and those guys have been doing radio for years. But it's an interesting process having to get on the air, try to sound intelligent for an hour. It's interesting. Being interviewed is pretty easy because you got 3 or 4 minutes. You say what you say, you hit it or miss it or whatever. But trying to sustain rational dialogue with somebody else for an hour is a whole new thing for us. And I hail from Washington, D.C. is where our base is. I guess that's enough before we get to the real
Meat of the subject.
meat of the subject. Well said.
Okay.
I'm Pat Truman. I'm formerly the Chief Prosecutor at the U.S. Department of Justice in Washington on both adult and child pornography crimes as well as child sex abuse. And I stumbled into this issue. I happened to be working at the Justice Department and in a Bible study with in the Attorney General's office when the Attorney General's Commission on Pornography issued its final report 1983, indicating that pornography is causing widespread harm. I never thought that was such a serious issue. I had been very active in the Right to Life movement. We used to head a group called Americans United for Life. And when this commission came out, the Attorney General appointed a fellow in our Bible study to be the chief of this section that was going to prosecute all these pornographers. And this guy turned to me and he said, "I just got this appointment. I want you to be my deputy." And so I joined that section, and this fellow left, and then I became head of it. And I wouldn't have thought it was important until I studied the issue of pornography. I wouldn't have thought it was affecting many people. And that's what I want to talk about today, how it's affecting you and your family. Thank you.
Thanks.
My name is Bradley Dean. I do high school assemblies across the country as well as colleges. My PhD is in the School of Hard Knocks, literally. Just go online and you'll find out exactly what I'm talking about. I'm also a columnist for WND, the Liberty Alliance and the such, Western Journalism, and 27 other outlets. We also broadcast a radio station, or broadcasts called Sons of Liberty in 52 countries and 25 affiliates in the United States of America today. So my objective here is to bring about the resolve, and the resolve is bringing it to the students. And I get firsthand experience as to what we'll be talking about here today. So hopefully that's why I asked to be last, because if I'm last, then I can kind of bring the culmination of everything together and just kind of tell you what I'm seeing and see how everybody else leaves it out. So thank you.
Well, I'm thrilled to be here with such distinguished folks, and I could give a lot of long speeches about the problems that we have being associated with the claims of the academic profession, which is really at the root of a great deal of the difficulty that we're facing worldwide, because the academic profession has positioned itself as being the expert in all of these areas, and it is not, never was, never would be. And indeed, never mind, I won't go into all that, but that's all to say that we are dealing here with people who can speak to this issue and should be speaking to this issue and should be heard nationwide, worldwide. So I will start by just setting these folks up with a little bit of history. Most people know that we're facing, there we go, why don't you do that? Yes. Oh, that's the National Research Council. Sorry, it's the wrong one. Never mind. We'll just look at that. What the hey? Yeah. Oh, well, I just, that's the way it goes. It'll do the job just as well. That there's a historical trail. We didn't get to child sex trafficking in the United States of America and worldwide, but certainly in the United States of America, we didn't get to child sex trafficking without following a certain trail. It's sort of, I was just thinking today, it's like Hansel and Gretel, okay? Gretel, they were dropping the little crumbs along the way to get to the witch's house so you'd know how we got there. Well, that's essentially what I'm going to try to do today, is to talk to you about the little crumbs that were dropped along the way that got us to where we are today, because you cannot deal with the kinds of violence and the kinds of brutalities that we're facing today in the world without identifying how we got there. Doesn't matter how much we chop off the little limbs at this point if we keep going back to the same place. Do you understand what I'm saying? Okay, so what the heck? This is National Research Council. That's where I was last time. Wrong one. It's okay. It's 10 minutes. AIDS, sexual behavior, and intravenous drug use. Our sexual knowledge changed from the pre-Kinsey era to the post-Kinsey era. You'll learn about Kinsey in just a minute. Wow. Dr. Alfred C. Kinsey proved that public sexual morality laws are basically useless. And so we began to see the elimination of the laws that we had in the United States of America controlling sexual conduct, because we knew biblically that sexual conduct will change the nature of a society, for good or for ill. Okay, so the Kinsey era libeled the greatest generation, that's my old generation, as sexually promiscuous. They said that we were sexually promiscuous, our grandparents were sexually promiscuous. However, the fact was that, thank you, Tom Brokaw, that faith in God was part of the generation, that fidelity, responsibility, and a commitment to honesty was it is how they were raised. And in fact, it's how they were raised, and therefore it is how come they were able to survive and win the World War II, win World War II for the world, right? For the world. And the world seems to have forgotten that, and so has the American public. But it is how they were raised. The Rockefeller Foundation funded, which is another story and a half. You all have to get my books, and they're at the Liberty Council table. I expect everybody here to get this, because you need to read and learn and know, and also watch some of the documentaries. Rockefeller funded the Kinsey indecency lies, that is, the lies about what we did. That World War II men saying that they were wanton, they were sex hypocrites. 1948, 1953, we had above the fold all over the country images of Dr. Alfred Kinsey and his prestigious team with whom he was really having Congress. All right? I mean, we have a...
Congress, like Washington, D.C.?
Actually, in a manner of speaking, one could kind of extrapolate, that way. But anyway, we have an underage population, so okay, with Congress, and so these images were all over the country. He was the most famous man in the United States, in the world. I'm sorry, Gore Vidal, the most famous man in the world. For a full decade now, very few people knew about this guy down in the corner. His picture was never in the newspaper because, in fact, he was Kinsey's World War II pimp. He was a partner in his Congress and that sort of thing. All right? 50 millions of educated youth were trained to, in the 50s rather, millions of youth were trained to trust Kinsey's proofs that that purity was a fraud and that its laws were violating they were learning from the academic profession was sexual reality and health. And here's Kinsey down here at the bottom, and that is the University of in Berkeley, University of California at Berkeley. Hundreds of thousands of our future leaders. He was worshipped in Europe, Canada, the United Kingdom. Here he is in Copenhagen. Look at all those high-end people, right? All academicians. Writing down his every word. My goodness, look what we're learning about sex. Well, the Human Events said that Kinsey's books were the most harmful American books of the 19th and 20th centuries, and that is the reason that you sitting here have to know what he said. Yeah. And Liam Neeson played Kinsey in a major film. Laura Linney played his wife in this major film, Fox Searchlight film. And Laura Linney, who playing his wife, said Kinsey's in everyone's sexual education, she said, in the past 50 years came right from the Kinsey Institute. Kinsey changed our culture completely. So don't you need to know how the culture was changed? Don't you need to know what we were thinking before in order to understand how we got to thinking something after, right? Okay, quickly. Phil Donahue, I was on in 1990, I was on the Phil Donahue show, and Donahue said, well, we've based an entire generation of sexologists on Kinsey, and Kinsey was a dirty old man. But Donahue loved Kinsey, and so he said, no, he wasn't. The guy was married once, a nuclear family kind of guy. This was on the Donahue show. On the same show, Kinsey's photographer was on that program, and Kinsey's photographer said, well, Kinsey listened to pedophiles. Everybody knows who a pedophile is now, right? When I started this research and I used the word pedophile, people thought I was talking about somebody who liked to ride a bicycle. Yeah, they did. Everybody knows now. Is it just that we're smarter? No, it's that we have more pedophiles and we have changed our belief system so that it has bred more people who are sexually molesting children. So we know now it's not just somebody who likes to ride a bicycle. All right. He listened to pedophiles who were very careful, used stopwatches, knew how to record their thing. Now, ladies and gentlemen, that's science. That's science? Okay. Donahue. Huh, they were in prison at the time, right? Tripp. Oh, certainly not. Certainly not. They were trained observers. He followed by saying, and I call them criminals, but they weren't in prison. Okay, here's just one of many charts, and I carried my big book here, Kinsey, Sexual Behavior in the Human Male, in case anybody has any questions, and it's a lot of heavy stuff I'm carrying around. Okay, this is the scientific basis of human sexuality education, which is the basis of the human sex trafficking that we're dealing with today, and the basis of all pornography. Hugh Hefner was a virgin in college at the time, I think it's on there somewhere, and he read Kinsey and he said, oh my goodness, we have been doing all these things. I'm gonna be Kinsey's pamphleteer. Anyway, so here you are. What's that? That's a 5-month-old child, isn't it? 5-month-old. He's also does my other tables, he's got a 2-month-old, all right? 4-year-old, 26, we'll say, congressional achievements, okay, okay, in 24 hours, all right, do you all read that, right? in 24 hours. That's a 4-year-old. Now that is an experiment with that child around the clock. Do you understand? Around the clock. By the Kinsey Institute people, by Kinsey indeed. They're tax funded to the tune of $21 million in the last few years, all right? And and how did he describe the responses of these children to this Congress, right? 196 boys, he called them 6 types. He broke them up. It was very scientific, right? Broke them up into 6 types. And he said they're all under 12 years of age, this one group, right? And he said that they are sexual from birth. He proved that because there were some that fought what he called the partner. That's a man who's with the boys, right? These are all boys. Convulsions and cries, 17%, rigid sadism and all that. Kinsey defined all that as climax, all right? Why would he do that? Well, he was a sadomasochist himself, right? And he was a homosexual, bisexual. He tortured himself terribly. We won't go into all that. It's a little bit crude for the short few minutes. So, believing the science of a sexual psychopath then has moved us from what we were called in World War II. We were called a child-centered society. You're all too young to remember, to know that. We were called a child-centered society, and we've moved into a child abuse society. And this is under 3 generations. Follow the little pieces of bread that Gretel and Hansel are dropping. That's what we're doing right here. And now, what does the Indianapolis Star say? Finally, they linked sexology with today's sadism and pornography. This is the Indianapolis Star. That is Kinsey. He was an exhibitionist. He was a sadomasochist. And that is the father of human sexuality education globally. I can tell you, globally. I don't have time to go into the global thing, but it's global. So what happens? Well, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. In 1955, the Rockefeller Foundation funded a national model penal code. Kinsey's sex data then would loosen and would end sex laws. From these 2 books, they've created what they called a model penal code. I'm at the law school now teaching that process to the law students there. It ought to be a process that's taught worldwide, and so people know what happened to their laws, but they don't know that until we teach them. So sex science beat out the common law. It legalized fornication, which was illegal at the time. That meant sex before you got married, for those of you who are too young to know that stuff. Seduction was against the law. It was a crime. Yeah, it was a crime. It was a felony in California. Okay. Abortion, legalized. No-fault divorce emerged out of the sex education training. Sodomy, obscenity now is called pornography. Sex education, grooming, gay marriage, which is on the docket, and so forth as well. Whoops, okay, now let's go there. All right, quickly, I won't go into it, but age of consent was lowered drastically. Rape, statutory rape, rape would get death in 18 states and life in 22. And it was a simple rape. You don't have to cut off. Well, anyway, you didn't have to do worse things. Fornication, all that gets legalized, seduction, adultery, divorce, child, and so on and so on and so on. That's the ALI model penal code. I won't let you see it because you have to buy the book, and then you'll look in the book, and it's all in there for you. And I didn't do all that just for fun, you know? I used to work for Captain Kangaroo. I used to be a songwriter and a singer. I used to have a good time. And here I am doing this, so you better read what I wrote, okay? This is just a headache. So we have thousands of law journal articles being written praising Kinsey and carrying on about Kinsey. Here we go. Here's a good one. Hugh Hefner. He said he would be Kinsey's pamphleteer. He decided he wasn't going to be virgin anymore. Kinsey proved it. And what's that flag? That's out of his magazines floating what flag over the Capitol? You got it, honey. Well, they didn't win in Holland because in 1994, Playboy sued me, that's JAR, for libel. The judge ruled that my Department of Justice data, Pat, my DOJ data, proved that Playboy systemic child pornography in Playboy, systemic, deliberate, over time, that follow the little bits of bread, were uncontested fact. Now, if you can win, I can tell you, if you can win against Playboy on child pornography in Amsterdam, you can win against Playboy anywhere on child pornography, okay? And Kinsey's pamphleteer, he led the sexual revolution to family collapse, sex disease, crimes, pandemic, child sex, hardcore porn, and so on. this is quickly, and I have copies of this for you to look at for people who don't believe me. That was my research for the United States Department of Justice on images of children, crime, and violence, Playboy, Penthouse, and Hustler. Letters from the Missing Exploited Children Center saying this is the most important work that's been produced in this area. You gotta read it. Playboy Child Sex had 5% per issue, and in 1971, that was their biggest issue. They had 17 copies, 17 per issue. They started with cartoons. This was a more advanced cartoon at a Playboy with a little girl saying it's going to cost $40 to this gentleman who appears to be, father, uncle, whoever. They started with the cartoons. They moved into photographs, kidnapping kids, teenagers, that sort of thing. I've covered all that stuff. The 70s, okay, this is Playboy in the 70s. Baby doll, she feels paternalistic to the cuddly type above. Come on strong, big daddy. That is Playboy. And if you think this is not conditioning, then you don't know what conditioning is. You are rewiring the human brain. Rewiring those consumers, those little boys who are looking at it, the little girls who are looking at it, the family people who are looking at it. And this, by the way, is just, they test this, so it's this 2011. Moving very quickly, the sex ed curriculum. This is the faculty, the staff, and the students who train the global sex field. I carry the book with me because it's hard to believe. And they're engaged in an orgy. All right, lots of what do we call that? Congress. Thank you. Lots of Congress taking place here in various ways. Yeah. Okay, and child pornography sold to Hustler magazine. Okay, now we have a federal anti-grooming act where we say that you can't show children sex acts. You can't show them pornography. You can't show them how to do these things. You can't show them how to perform those acts or to engage in these acts, okay? And we know it's settled science that if you will lower the sex inhibitions, you indicate it's okay to have sex, and we're doing that in the classrooms, that we will be and this is from the book, and I have the book with me. It's perfectly normal, yeah, that you are now grooming them for pedophiles, and either by pedophiles or for pedophiles, all right? And that's, by the way, illegal. So state mandated, this is pedophile grooming it's perfectly normal, right? Okay, I have the book that's going on in the United Kingdom, normalizing homosexuality, bisexuality, transvestism, the whole thing. In your classrooms, physically altering the brain, and I have a whole series on the brain, which I don't have time for, but a whole series on the child's brain, developmental incapacity to deal with this kind of stuff. Kinsey started the homosexual revolution. That's the Kinsey scale. Heterosexuals get the 0 at the bottom. Full homosexuality gets a 6 at the top. You're talking about children being given novels in the classroom, homosexual novels in the classroom, out novels to glamorize all of this sort of thing. So, see, I'm wrapping it up. Am I good?
You're doing wonderful.
Doing good. Okay, break the arm of the wicked and evil man. Okay, we have 17 Security and Exchange Commission people caught consuming pornography, 5,200 Pentagon staffers with child pornography in 2010.
Right.
And hardly anybody investigated for that, by the way. 58,200 non-family child abductions in 1999. And our scientists, by the way, are going to tell you that we've got a lower rates of child sexual abuse. That's really terrific. I love their data. Okay, sure, it's really good. 64%, this is DOJ data, 64% of our forcible sodomy victims are boys under 12, 67, talk about, normalizing homosexuality. 67% of our sex abuse victims are under 17. Anybody know who he is?
Sure.
All right, moving right along. Now, Alfred Kinsey's global impact. This is a Chinese book. It's Kinsey's book. It's titled Kinsey, the Man Who Has Changed the World. It's in Chinese. This is a Swiss documentary, how Kinsey came to Switzerland and changed their sex education. I was just, and there they are having a big protest, by the way. I was just in Croatia. Croatia is now mandating Kinsey sex education in the classroom for the little Catholic children in Croatia. There we are. There I am at the Parliament testifying. This was last month, 2 months ago, and we got a huge very wonderful response from the public, a very negative response from academicians, and a negative response, of course, from the mass media. Look, I'm wrapping it up. Okay, Indiana University, that's Indiana University. They still collect secret sex diaries. They still cover up the evidence of the most egregious child sex atrocities in the history of science or of any society, all right? The Institute still gets millions in state, federal, private funds annually to support global pedo grooming. They are still the most harmful books. What are your weapons? Your weapons are, yes, the Holy Bible. Yes, the Patriot's Handbook. It's what's being sold there. My new book, Sexual Honor, Sexual Innocence, Sexual Sabotage, another book that I've done, and a bunch of other things. All the DVDs, go on my website. 5 Steps to Justice for the Children. And justice for our World War II heroes. It makes me crazy. I'm old enough that it really drives me nuts to see the libel of our World War II generation and the true American history. So, display the child sex abuse tables. There's 5 of them wherever you go. Quote the Kinsey lies in every legal case that involves sex, which is not being done. Demand a federal investigation of the sex education materials for violating the federal anti-grooming law. Impound the Kinsey Institute files for evidence of child sex abuse and their cover-up. Call out the past and the current victims, because we have current victims, because they're still sending in their data, of Kinsey's child sex torture diaries. Broadcast the libel of our World War II generation to justify his sexual perversions and his sexual revolution, homosexual, bisexual, transvestite, everything else, alerting the world to the infant and their child sex atrocities. And contact me. There's my email. And go on is that my email? No, it's my website. But the email's on there. Thank you very much. And that's your history that lays the foundation for what these gentlemen now will present.
Wow. He's going to go next. I'm going to go first.
Well, that history is very important because it really is the beginning of what is the sanitized term, the sexual revolution. Now, it's not a new beginning. We've had sexual revolutions in the world time and time again, and they always result in the destruction of society. And sexual revolution is, as I said, a sanitized name. What it really is an insurrection against God's plan for the body, for the human. John Paul II, the Catholic Pope so revered, had a series of lectures that are now in book form, and they're studied not only by the Catholics, but by many non-Catholics as well. And the title is a beautiful title. It's called The Theology of the Body.
Wow.
What a wonderful term that is. Theology of the body. You mean God has a plan for the body. It's an integrated vision, body, soul, and spirit. And unless we understand that that is God's plan, we're doomed to fail. Now look at around American society. Look what Judith just taught us. Alfred Kinsey is here starting a sexual revolution, really an insurrection against God. And look at where we are today. And so I think it's very important to understand that pornography is a vital part of this insurrection. I used to head a group called Americans United for Life, as I mentioned. And I just last week was back in Chicago, where that used to be their headquarters when I was head of it. And someone who knew me back then said to me, Pat, why did you get out of the pro-life movement and go into this area? As if to say, gee, killing of babies, that's very serious. Why are you just doing something like this? And I said to him, I didn't get out of the fight. I just went back to the beginning.
Right.
Because you've already
That's right.
seen now how important pornography is to what these people intend. I have 2 college girls, and I just recently was not really arguing with them, but it was about same-sex marriage, because unfortunately their cousin now got married in Washington, D.C. And, the argument was, well, Dad, he's better off with his partner. You know how much trouble he was, in all this. And what I tried to get them to understand is that you've got to look at who your partners are. If you're going to support same-sex marriage, who are the people that advocate for that? Now, we've just seen this, so I'm not going to go through it all. But, you've named the names. It's Hugh Hefner, it's Larry Flint, it's Alfred Kinsey, it's the American Civil Liberties Union, the people that want to take down our values, that hate America.
Right.
Now, let's get that right. And then when you say that in a public forum, they say, oh, we don't hate America. No, you hate America. You hate what it stands for. It's a Judeo-Christian country. And pornography is so vital to taking down America. It's insidious. I don't want you to do this, but if you were to look at pornography for an hour or two on the internet, it wouldn't escape your observation that pornography today is very violent. Very violent. There used to be two camps of feminists. The one camp said, well, pornography is empowering. If a woman wants to go into that, earn money, let her do it. And the other camp said, no, that's a violation of women. The first camp is disappearing. The feminists today see what pornography has become. And pornographers today, when they're confronted, the producers, why is pornography so violent? Why do you make pornography so violent? They say, well, it isn't us, we're just reflecting what people demand. And you know what? I'm going to let them off the hook on that, because that is true. It's not their fault, it's what people demand. So the first thing you have to understand about pornography is how it works. When a man, I'll just use a man because women are involved in pornography today too. In fact, years ago when Judith and I were working at the Department of Justice, we used to say that women aren't interested in pornography. It's just something they're not interested in. They don't have the same responses that man does. And I don't need to explain that to you with young people in the audience. But women today, because of internet, do. But you have to understand what pornography does to the brain. When you begin looking at pornography, best explanation I've heard of this by Dr. Norman Dodge, who wrote a book. It's not about pornography. It's about the malleability of the brain and all the wonderful cures that come today because the brain is very malleable. But he has a chapter about pornography, which he says perfectly illustrates the malleability of the brain. And he describes how pornography changes the brain. When you look at pornography, there's two pleasure systems in the brain. One is fueled by dopamine. If you look at pornography, or think you're going to, dopamine spikes. That's the excitement pleasure system. The other pleasure system is fueled by endorphins. That doesn't kick in. It does in marital relations. When a couple's going to have marital relations, dopamine spikes. That's the excitement pleasure. But when the act is over, endorphins kick in, and that's the satisfactory pleasure system. And you don't have to run out and have sex with another person and another person. Same way with a good meal. You go out for a good meal, and you're going to go to your favorite restaurant, dopamine spikes. When you have that meal, endorphins kick in, and you're satisfied. Well, with pornography, it's only the dopamine that spikes, and you don't get any satisfaction. And this explains why men can spend hours and hours and hours looking at pornography. But what it does, it leads them to demand harder and more deviant material. I won't go into this all, but this is why we have a plague of child pornography today. When I left the Justice Department as chief prosecutor 20 years ago, child pornography was virtually wiped out in America. Today it's the most popular sexual crime. And who are the people that are being arrested? It's people like me, like the Reverend, like this gentleman here. It's men, grandparents, husbands, etc.
Yeah,
You should, you're out.
Keep me out of it.
You're out.
Don't point now.
So,
His point is well taken, though. Okay.
So I just want to say that we have a crisis on our hands. I'm going to cut my remarks short here, but I want to say that if we want to do something about this, you have to include the issue among the other issues. Groups, and I hate to mention names, but groups like Focus on the Family and some of the other groups made a mistake a few years ago when they turned to fight the marriage issue. I'm not indicting them, but they poured it all into the marriage issue as though that was a separate issue. Focus on the Family used to be the top anti-pornography group in the country.
Yes.
But they rarely do much now. And I'm not criticizing because they've been through a crisis with Jim Dobson leaving and whatnot. But the point is, you can't just fight marriage. You can't just, or same-sex marriage. You can't just fight abortion. It's, as Judith showed us, it's all part of one thing. And I want to say that we have laws on pornography in this country.
That's right.
Federal laws and state. Do you know that in federal law, it's a violation of federal law to distribute hardcore pornography on the internet? It's a violation of federal law to distribute hardcore pornography in that hotel motel that you stay in. That channel's illegal.
Yep.
It's a violation of federal law for Comcast, Verizon, and the other cable companies to have the hardcore porn channel. And I'll just say in concluding, we've had someone hand out a list that we just put out, Dirty Dozen list of pornography facilitators. Look who's on the list. It's Comcast, it's Twitter, it's Facebook, it's all these companies. There's a lot of illegal material, but the one person that's number one on the list is Eric Holder, the Attorney General of the United States, because he refuses to enforce pornography laws.
Okay.
Bishop. So, and the final thing I want to say, I think you all got this church brochure. We have church brochures that are for Catholics. This one's for non-Catholics. We have them for Jews. Ask your pastor if you could have something in the church on pornography. Because I'll tell you this, at least, I don't care how good a preacher you are. I don't care how good the people in your community are. At least half the men in your church are struggling daily with pornography. Amen. So please include this issue in your fight. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pat. And he brings a long history working in this area for you. And I'm going to move this to Bishop. And let me just mention, it's not just anymore the men. You're talking about kids, massive addiction with kids, and which you guys will explain further, and women too. Please, thank you.
Okay. Wow, that's very informative. And I'm going to have to get the name of the book and try to remember all the dopamine and what was the other? Endorphins. All right. Well, as I look at this problem, it's very obvious that there's a family breakdown. I think, as you talked about, Focus and other groups, perhaps a way to think about it as well is that perhaps part of our marital breakdown problems can come from the introduction of pornography and other materials into our relationships. But something unique happened to me the other day, I should say, or a few months ago, and that was I really got the feeling that I should spend some time working with teenagers within our local context. I lead a communion of churches, and one of our key leaders, bishops, is out here in the audience. Arbor Shines here from Tampa. And we were really just wanting to connect with the teenagers. And so we had a couple of services where we spent time just with teenagers within our church context. And so we sent some of our best teachers back, talked with the teachers, and I spent about a month, during the month of March, doing a teaching series called Meeting God, and then listening to questions, talking to some of the workers. And I observed certain things that I want to share with you that go hand in hand with the issue of pornography, family breakdown, family structure. And in these few minutes, maybe I can give you a little bit of outline of what I think could be some helpful directions we could move in. But what I found as we went back and started working with our teenagers is that there's something I'm going to call the father wound that's going on. Yeah. And the father wound is absent fathers from homes creates some kind of vacuum. And these learned folk would tell you that a lot of times when there isn't a dad in the house or an appropriate male bonding that goes on with boys and girls, some kind of inappropriate sexual identification and habits begin to happen, I'm convinced that promiscuity and homosexuality in boys are more or less flip sides of the same coin. There's an absence of that father bond. There's an absence of a value system passed on by the father to their children. And so as I was with our teenagers, I also found that there is a need for them to understand their destiny, their purpose. So almost across the board, if you're going to talk purpose, destiny to kids in a credible way, they would listen. So it's been a very interesting since the beginning of the year. Our youth ministry, even with an old fogey like me, talking in a special service with them, we've seen many kids come to Christ, having very powerful experiences. We've had over a doubling of attendance in our youth ministries, of things that we do on Sunday morning, because we just talk very straight, very clear about how to know God, what things the Lord requires of them. A few weeks ago, Easter Sunday morning, I had the privilege of being on the famed program Faced the Nation, and there was ironically, an imam on there, an American-born imam. There was a Episcopalian bishop, woman bishop, who believed in same-sex marriage, and although she is heterosexually married, and there was a Jewish rabbi and Archbishop Timothy Dolan came on with a tape, and we talked about the problems in America, and I talked about the need for young people to know that something about their destiny and purpose. And I think that destiny and purpose comes from two sources, really. The unique awareness of their gifts and their calling, one kind of channel, and another that they really belong with a family, that familial connection, and how they fit into that larger tribe, perhaps, that they're a part of. But there's an issue. There's so much breakdown in terms of sexual abuse, pornography, all these things, that there is additional fracturing that has happened with these kids. I found out that, you alluded to it, I don't know all the stats, that like the kids as young as 8 years old are using pornography in this day. That was news to me. I found out that in Prince George's County, suburban Washington, D.C., that there was a gang in D.C. That is infamous, made up of lesbians who are beating up people, and they go to girls and tell them, hey, we'll protect you, but you got to come and be with us. And gangs like this are operating all up and down the eastern seaboard, and many of the parents don't know much about what's going on. And so in our setting, as I go kind of to the cure, maybe you've been so detailed in the issue of promiscuity. Let me say this in the next 2 or 3 minutes that I have to talk. As I spent time with these young folks, and we'll be working with them over the summer, and with an idea of my next level is to spend time with some of the children in our church, teaching about worship, interacting, is that there has to be some kind of male influence in their lives that is safe and healing if we're going to see these next generations come forth whole and strong and really knowing Christ. It seems to me that we have got to have a predator-free zone even within the church. Just look at the problems. No offense to the Roman Catholic Church. We see an issue, but all organizational or institutional churches have had some measure of these kinds of problems with pedophilia and other issues, and I think you've helped me by helping me understand pornography at the root of it. Think about the fact that we got to start talking earlier about sex, the honor, the glory, if you will, of sexual activity, of saying keep yourself, remain a virgin till you get married. We've got to begin to say to our children, though, instead of in some of our communities, we're saying, wait to get married till you're 26, till you finished undergraduate school, graduate school, you got X amount of thousands of dollars in the bank. If you started looking at pornography or attempted sexually at 8, and you're telling me hold these hormones in place till 26, and a man has a sexual prime at 18, I don't count too well, but something's wrong with how we're projecting these things. Jewish tradition says at age 13, you're a man or woman. Maybe we got this thing kind of twisted, and we need to rethink biblical courtship the way that, at least in my corner of the church world, we were kind of running along. We were inviting children to have secret sin with pornography, outlet in promiscuity, and then ruining, if you will, their appetite to do the right thing. Let me end with this about what fathers are supposed to do. It's a proven fact that mentors, external fathers, folks who touch kids in the right way emotionally in these predator-free zones. Is that a good way of saying that?
Yeah, I like that.
Is that communicated? So I've been saying that to our men. Fathers can do something mothers can't do. A father brings sense of affirmation, acceptance, approval, affection, and authority. And at least back where I live, or the churches that we are relating to now, seems to me that we're going to have to go back to the drawing board and start teaching parents again, along with our young people, about how to be fathers, about how to encourage their children, and at critical times in our life, we are going to have to make sure that there's this positive male influence in their lives if we want to turn the nation back around. It's not going to take a village or all of us. It's going to take a family or a church family that says it's going to help minister. So that's fine.
Thank you. Absolutely, well said, and we know that this is absolutely accurate. We don't need the scientists to tell us, but the scientists do even admit that, so, yeah, completely. And the teenage years, critical years for these young people, and of course, the teenagers are dropping younger and younger, as you pointed out.
Yes.
We can now, do we get any music with this, or?
No, just the long hair.
Okay.
I hope that works.
That's all right.
Charles Spurgeon, the Prince of Preachers, rightly said that I have not seen, ear have not heard, the things that God has prepared for those that hate him. And what's missing in the church today is the fear of God, where men depart from evil. And that's exactly what we need in the church is God. John Adams, the second president of the United States, rightly said that the church is called to be the moral compass of society. When that goes, everything else goes.
Right.
And America is trying to figure out what is the problem. Okay, so we magnify the crime. We're so backwards in this country now, we magnify the crimes.
Right.
Hey guys, we're talking about our kids.
Well,
We're not talking about someone else's kids in a third world country. I do high school assemblies across the country, and I see this on a daily basis. You see what's going on in public schools today? 86% of those that send their kids into public schools are Christians, patriots, and or conservatives. Complaining about a federal government violating Article 10 of the Bill of Rights. They have no business in the educational scheme whatsoever.
Amen.
That's left up to the states respectively, not the federal government. The government's already violated the law right there.
Right.
And let me say this too. If we have a problem with Eric Holder, let's impeach him.
Amen. Exactly.
You know, Machiavelli, come on guys. This is America. Patriots means to uphold dying laws. It doesn't mean go with the flow and let the government do whatever they want to do to we the people.
Right. That's right.
They derive their just powers from the consent of the government. Do they not know what the Declaration of Independence rightly says?
Right.
Come on, tell the truth and shame the devil. Now, if I was in a black church right now, they'd all be standing up saying, bring it on, brother. It's true. Guys, we're talking about our kids.
That's right.
If I was to take some of these books, Judith Reisman, that they are throwing on elementary students in public schools, I memorized it and I walked up to a student and started talking to him in such a fashion to rehearse in their ears what that book just taught me, I'd go to jail.
That's right.
That's right.
I'm talking about public schools, guys.
Wow.
Just think about that. You got Kevin Jennings, the Obama Safe Schools are.
Oh, yeah.
No, just hang out with me.
Uh-huh.
Who writes a foreword to a book called Queering the Elementary?
Yep.
His icon is Harry Hay from NAMBLA, North American Man-Boy Love Association. Their motto walking up and down gay pride parades is sex before 8, before it's too late.
Right. Yes.
Right.
Oh, yeah. Look at these people. They didn't even know this.
Oh, I did.
Yeah, National Education Association has got a homosexual caucus. That was not good enough. They have to have a drag queen caucus now.
Oh my.
In New York, they're teaching kids bestiality.
Yes.
Teachers that are touching children illegally, might I add, are left without consequence for their violation of touching the children, the parents that send their kids into public schools in the first place.
Yeah.
See, the problem is, it says right over the top of the Supreme Court building with Moses and the Ten Commandments, justice is the guardian of liberty. See what we're leading off here is justice.
Right.
Because we're not enforcing the laws against their crime.
Right. Right.
See, we're having meetings talking about the problems, but we're not addressing the problems. Let me be quite candid with you, please. You touch people's kids that I know, you don't have to call the cops.
Amen. That's right.
I'm not kidding you. You don't have to call the cops. Let all the pedophiles know that.
That's right.
I have a friend that's an investigator in Anoka County in Minnesota. He said, pedophiles, he said, Bradley, you cannot rehabilitate them people.
That's
He
right.
said they are the nicest people to your face. You turn their back on you, or you turn your back on them. He said they'll go right after the kids.
That's right.
Friends, you need to pay attention as to what's going on in your country right now. When I do these high school assemblies across this country, I had no problems in public schools until the homosexual agenda started to come in and batter ram
Right.
everybody that stands against them. Homosexuality, for those that don't realize this is about upending the Constitution of the United States of America. Let me take you over to Canada really quick. In Canada, where they just legalized an unlawful act called homosexual marriage, the first thing the government did, because it's in a governmental, listen carefully, it's a government's interest, because they know the more immoral people become, the more power you give corrupt governments.
That's right.
See, if you don't want to listen to God's 10 commandments, you're going to listen to man's 10,000 commandments, aren't you?
Right.
And that's exactly what we're seeing today.
Wow.
But in Canada, friends, what we need to pay attention to is the fact that the first thing the government did was attack the church.
That's right. That's right.
They started telling the church what they could do and what they couldn't do. The second thing they did is they went after homeschoolers.
Right.
Has nothing to do with homosexual marriage, friends. Zero. Nada. Nothing. This is about giving power over to government to control your lives. That's all this is about. The third thing they did is they wanted to lower the age of anal consent from 16 years old to 14 years old in Canada.
Wow.
Then they set up human rights commission boards to basically attack anybody that sought to speak out against homosexuality. It's exactly what's going on in your country today. See, what we need is we need men in the church to stand up, regardless of how they're demonized or vilified, and they stay the course like an MLK. Those kind of men.
Right.
And I want to give you an encouraging word, friends. When you look in Scripture and you look in Hebrews 11, and you see that it's the faith chapter, and you look at a guy like Gideon, and you look at how God called that mighty man of valor out, who was not qualified. The first thing the Lord told him is, go this and thou thy strength. Go. Go deal with the Midianites, the oppressors. Did you know that he started out with 22,000 people? God said that's too many. He broke it down to 10,000. God said that's too many. He broke it down to 300 because no flesh should glory in the presence of my daddy. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever, friends. He really is.
Right. Yes.
Did you realize that God used them 300 men that were willing to stand up and play the men of God that they really were? That God gave them the necks of their enemies, 135,000 of them. Folks, you're not dealing with that in this country. You're dealing with the press, and you're dealing with less than 1.7% of the population.
That's right. That's right.
That's what the church is capitulating from.
Yeah.
Folks, they don't have the numbers. They don't have the support. The only thing they have is the state-run media. And if we would start dealing with the state-run media.
That's right.
Here, case in point, and I'm done. Boy, I like cleaning up more than I like to just kind of drive the line a little bit, but I think it's important that we understand we need resolve. Our students need resolve. I did a high school assembly in Pensacola, Florida here. We've done 342 of them across the country in 22 different states. I'm in this school, there's churches all around the school here. They're being taught evolution, they're being taught homosexuality. These students are trying to figure out why their pastors and their parents love them so much, yet they're thrown into the cesspool to be indoctrinated by the federal government who has no business being there in the first place.
That's right.
So where does it really lie to? We can't complain about what we tolerate. And if we love them, we'll fight for them. And let me say this one more time. These are our kids.
Right.
Our kids. And we're up here talking about what the pornography industry is breeding. It's illegal, as they pointed out. This is unlawful activity. And I mean what I say. If Eric Holder doesn't want to uphold the law, what is it, the Department of Injustice, or is it the Department of Justice? I'm sorry.
Injustice.
How many hundreds of thousands of men fought, bled, and died to give us the freedoms that we have, that the American people are allowing this administration to desecrate on a daily basis?
That's right.
Shame on America. Folks, we can do this. We can do this thing if we come together and we play the men and the women, regardless of what anybody else has to say about it. We're talking about winning the day for our posterity. 237 years later, we still have the freedom, listen carefully, we still have the freedom to do the right things, guys. It ain't over. It ain't over until the fat lady sings, and I don't hear her singing yet. It's time for the men to stand up, play the men of God, will win the day. And let me tell you this, if 12 people in my ministry can do 342 high schools, and we have a nation of homosexuals that are afraid of those that are willing to stand up, you know what? They don't know how to respond to you when you stand up.
Yeah. That's right.
That's all they know how to do is call you names.
Right.
That's all they know how to do.
That's right.
You have God and the law on your side, friends, and when we start believing what God said, we're going to win the day. And by the way, we are.
Wake up,
Cool.
church.
So, ladies and gentlemen, is that fabulous?
Yes.
Yeah. Let me ask one question. I usually check when I'm here, but I didn't check this time to see if DoubleTree has porn on the.
It's a Hilton hotel, so it undoubtedly does.
All right.
Now, I'm not staying at that hotel.
All
so I
right.
didn't-
We're at, this is a DoubleTree that that we're all at, right? And one of the first things we can begin to do is to make sure that none of our meetings take place at a hotel that's got pornography, for heaven's sakes. And I was at a sex abuse conference once, all the victims downstairs, upstairs, pornography, right? And I said, everybody needs to go to the hotel, and the organizers of the conference need to protest and say, we're not coming back here again.
That's right.
Yeah, there are hotels that do not have pornography, and why we should pay
to support an industry that's responsible for the kind of violence to the children and to our society and anti-God? I don't know. So y'all can go, anybody that's at the hotel can certainly go and talk to that issue, you know, with the manager, and also, you know, talk to the organization people that we want to have any kind of activity, any church activity should never be in a hotel that's pimping children and women and boys and everybody else upstairs, okay? So, questions? Can we go to questions and stuff? Yeah.
If you have questions, please go to the microphone.
Oh, okay. There you go. Discussion, yeah, come on. We want some people to be, did we exhaust you? There you go.
Come on up here.
Up.
Yeah, you want to line up probably. So you found it.
All right, I have two quick questions. I'm kind of new to learning about this issue. It was just a couple years ago I interviewed a former porn star who had turned to Christ.
Who's that? Shelley Lubin?
Shelley Lubin, yeah.
Amen.
Anyway, so is there seem to be a rise in homosexuality porn, like homosexual porn? Like, does that seem to be more of an increase? And why, if that is the case? And also, what else can we do? Like, how can we fight back? If this is supposed to be illegal, but it's going on, what are we supposed to do to, like, stand up as Christians and as citizens and, you know, make a difference? So
I'll just answer the first part. I may not be happy to answer the other, but I'll let everybody weigh in. The question is whether or not there's more homosexual porn out there. Well, you have to understand how porn is distributed today and how it's consumed. It used to be that it was, you go down and get a Playboy magazine, you know, heterosexuals would go down and get that. They wouldn't go to a porn shop and get a homosexual magazine, or if they got to a porn shop, they'd get one that has, you know, women in it, right? Okay. But today the delivery system is the internet, and it's all mixed together. And so what happens is you're seeing all these images, and you're seeing violence and everything else. Not too long ago, there was a study, I think it's the University of Texas, on the same-sex marriage and the effect that pornography has on people. And the study shows that the more you consume pornography, the more likely you are to support same-sex marriage. And, by the way, as other studies show, every other deviation. You know,
Exactly.
so it makes sense, right? I mean, if you're going to look at it all the time. So, and you have things like lesbian porn that's a popular thing today. So guys will, you know, you go looking at this stuff on the internet, all this stuff pops up at you so fast. So if you're consuming that, you're going to, people today, I'm talking about our kids, I'm talking about adults, people are adopting the values of the porn producers because they're consuming.
Now, I would add that there's no question that it moves into more homosexual pornography. It has to, because that's more novelty, if you will. And I would add to the data that we have on the way the brain functions that pornography always involves shame. Always involves shame. Yeah, so pornography also always involves fear. So we've got the flight or fight response, and that means that you're not just having a hit from the dopamine, you're not just having that, you're also having a hit that has to do with our response to fear and shame, which is usually even more powerful than dopamine. All that kind of gets condensed and linked and goes into the appropriate organ, and people label that. They label that sex, and it's not sex. It's a combination of, as Shakespeare said, lust, with fear, with shame, with savagery, with all of these other negative emotions. So as that happens, yeah, guys are moving into, and yeah.
Maybe later you can answer questions about the shame part, just for some of the ministers or folks. That's great. And so, since I don't look at that much pornography, I had no idea this is swinging into the homosexual area. So what you're saying is, as people watch homosexual-based pornography, then it gives them permission to say what's wrong with people having sex with people of same sex, and same-sex marriage ought to be all right since they...
All of the above. All of the above. I'll add one other thing, and that is that
Warren, one of our ex-gay, Warren. Oh, well, anyway, was being interviewed, and he was describing his first experience, how he became homosexual. And it was a standard operating procedure. He's a kid, there's a Playboy magazine, all the little boys gather around and are looking at this magazine, and shortly thereafter, they fool around with one another. You don't go next door and say, knock on the door and say, Mrs. Smith, I just saw this in the magazine, can I try this? And so that was his introduction to homosexuality, and it took him many years to escape that. So, I'm sorry, do you want to say something there, Pat?
No, I was just looking at the clock too. I think, are we done at?
Yep, one more question.
Go ahead.
Hi, I would like to talk to you and how I could support and maybe find out some volunteer opportunities with your organization, or even get connected with Facebook or something, so I can maybe, look into some avenues of
We have a table,
volunteer or financial support.
okay, we have a table upstairs at the church. It's You Can Run International. You can run international. You can't miss us.
If you see the hat that he has, it's a logo.
Yeah.
There's a table in the
Thank
corner of the church. When you come in, you turn left. It's right there in the corner next to FRC and right by Pamela Geller's information. We have a whole bunch of DVDs and material.
Can I take just 1 minute?
Thank you.
Thank you.
In my research into this and education as a rule, I would just like everybody in this room to know that the changes that are coming to the curriculum and the education of our children in the next year or two is totally going to put them down to the lower level. It's all going to virtual. It's taking everything out of the parents' hands. Every one of our children would have an iPad at school to learn on, and it will not go home. Their teachers are going to not even have control. They're going to be classroom monitors, and those little iPads with all the software are going to be running their lives. You must pay attention to Common Core. Common Core is communism. And your legislators are passing the legislation to totally control your children in 45 states in this country. Yep. And your governors and your legislators are following the words of Jeb Bush. Sorry, I didn't want to take it away from you, but it works with what you're doing.
Absolutely.
Because they're interloping everything. We have children in classrooms having sex.
Yep.
Crawling underneath tables, underneath chairs.
Yep.
Why are they doing this?
Yep.
They're giving the access to it, and they're being told that it's okay because it's supposed to be all about them and feel good. Right.
It's all about their feelings. And it tracks back to this so much. It's so deep now and so depressing that if you're not locked into God, you're going to crawl, you're going to just lay down in a fetal position and hope you can go away. Judith will tell you, this is terrible. It's horrid. It's getting worse. You got to do it.
So
Thank you,
stand
guys.
up, ladies and gentlemen, as the gentlemen have all demonstrated here, and nobody's shooting at us yet, and start talking about ways to handle it. These beautiful young people deserve only our best. So thank you very much. Wish we had more time. But we started late.